Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you and glad to be with Denise Rukiki, my sidekick here. And we are doing trauma survivors walking each other home. And what we do every week, if you're joining us for the first time, is we own that we are trauma survivors. We own our high ACEs, adverse childhood experiences scores. And what we look to do is to tell the truth with love, not with shaming or blaming, but just tell the truth about how being trauma survivors affects us in our everyday lives and how we can help each other walk each other home, have a good life, given stuff that comes up that trauma survivors seem to have in common that we can help each other with. One of the challenges we have as trauma survivors is isolation. We're taught don't we were told, don't you dare talk about this. Don't you dare let anybody know what's going on. So here we are breaking the law. Thank you, Denise, for being one of the badass people with me. We're breaking the rule and we're telling the truth, and we're doing it for the reason of hoping that the truth sets us free. It's been my experience, strength, and hope. So I'm Holly Elissa Bruno, author of the book called Ever Since Happiness Heard Your Name. It's been running through the streets to find you, translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. And so now Denise comes this week of first week in December. And she and I had very different holidays, very different honoring an Indigenous American holiday, and also the traditional Thanksgiving holiday. So Denise was just beginning to tell me what that was like for her. So let's listen in as Denise talks about her experience, strength, and hope, and let's find out how, as trauma survivors, we get it, how we can help each other. So thanks, Denise. Go for it, girl.
So recently, I'm always looking for little word activities to do with myself to encourage, thinking and creativity and whatnot. So I heard,
Can I ask you about that? What do you mean by a little? I think it's cool what you're doing. Well, tell me what do you mean by a little word activity?
okay, so the first thing that I did, the first time I went to a therapist ever, it was in Richmond, Virginia, and I had 6 weeks, that they would pay for me, or 6 sessions that they would pay for me. So I went to this therapist and I told her that I have 6 sessions to work with you. And I believe that I am a non feeling person. I do not have feelings. And so then she gave me this activity, which is words, thesaurus, activities for all the different feelings. And so I discovered that I actually did have feelings. They just weren't
All right.
really high or really low. So that was part of one of my steps in healing.
Mm-hmm.
So also another thing that I do in my healing is I often make little clay figures. So this is
Mm.
one that I made. I made this a long time ago. The head has fallen off, the hands
Mm.
have fallen off, but it goes like this. Let's see if I can show you. My thumbs are up and my arms are completely extended. And
Okay.
I've got the power.
I've got the power.
That's my little affirmation that I use sometimes. And so,
Oh, good for you, girl. Okay.
so I made this one to, be that. And I put a photograph on it for the teenage self that
Oh,
actually
cool.
needed the power. So,
Mm-hmm.
but today, since I'm trying to take the power back again. I'm trying to
Yes, ma'am.
reinstitute it. So, because I discovered over Thanksgiving some of the things that I need power over, that I would like to have more power. It's a new moon right now, so I often make
Mm.
three wishes for the new moon,
Okay. Good
and so
idea.
this is part of that healing activity. So I took the time to clean her. She had
All
a
right.
photograph on the front and a lot of glue. And want to do it again? I've got the
I've
power.
got the power. I
Yeah,
love it, honey.
it's a
Okay, you
good one.
cleaned it right up.
Cleaned it up. And so now, what I discovered, so this is a little word game. I
Okay.
saw this TikTok or reel or whatever that restated the Maslow's hierarchy.
Hmm?
And so this goes safety, belonging, value, agency, and meaning are the things that we
Interesting.
need. So I
Okay.
was, yeah. So the only one I was like not that familiar with was agency. So I did a word study on it. But first, and so which that helped me articulate
Mhm.
the sensations that I have at my mom's house.
Good.
Is
And this mom, you were at your mom's house for the holiday, right? For Thanksgiving.
right.
And that meant your whole biological family was getting together, the ones that would be there.
Yes, we would get together at my sister's house.
Oh, the sister's house. Well, you were driving your mom.
Yes,
Okay.
because my
All right.
brother
So
was
things
very
are
sick, and my brother didn't want to go, and he was also very sick. So he doesn't like gatherings anyway, but he was ill.
right.
So because my mom and my brother live together. So when I go
Oh,
visit them, what I relinquish, I discovered, is my agency. I just follow her around from the television to the television to little jobs that she gives me.
and
And
she's got lots of them.
she
Tell
actually
us,
does.
tell me what you mean by agency. Can you help us
Okay, so
understand it?
that's why I did this little thesaurus search because I wasn't really that sure of it either. And
Mhm.
so the main definition is that power, the exertion of power,
Mm-hmm.
being able to exert your own power. I wrote it up there. Yeah, I
Okay.
have a whiteboard.
All right. Good. So the
So that's how
ability
I
to
begin the
exert my
study.
own power. Good. No,
Right.
this is good.
Yeah. So then I went through the thesaurus and looked through words that I got about 20. And then I
Okay.
starred some, no, I circled some that I think I actually do possess
All
and
right.
that I am, you know, expressing because my concern always is I don't have feelings, or it always goes back to that, even though I know I'm a very empathetic feeling person. But
Yes, you are.
do I feel agency? So there's I circled a few words that I do practice, and then I
Okay.
starred three things that I want to make my wishes for this, my intentions for this new moon ritual, which I will do today at sunset.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So agency
So,
is essentially about having the power
right,
that was taken away
right.
when you were a
And
child.
the first picture that I put on this was
Hmm.
my 14-year-old self who told my
Wow.
mom, Jack is doing that to me, which Debbie reported. And then
Mhm.
she said it'll never happen again, and it never did.
Thank God.
But I mean,
So
it
this
had been
was
already going on for a couple years. So,
so this was sexual abuse that you were experiencing as a young girl,
right,
and it finally stopped when you reported it. But
right. So
boy, how
that's the
many
photo that I
months
put on here was me standing on the boat in a bathing suit because the next day we went out in the boat and
with him?
right, of course. Ugh. But anyway, so I
Mm,
put that on her. She's got the power. That
I love that. That's great.
right.
Yeah.
And I earned that power through doing yoga actually. And that's one of the
Ah,
it is a yoga a pose and
this is a yoga pose.
yeah,
What is it? A yoga pose? I
I
think
don't know what
this.
it's called, but see how your legs are, you're on your feet and
Right.
yeah.
Yes. It's great
Look
to
how
help
how
for.
skinny I was.
Yeah, honey, I'm impressed. But I'm impressed because this helps breathing.
Yes.
It opens
And
the whole
I've got
chest.
the power.
That's a power, honey.
And also
Yes.
it is like the new moon in that if you turn, you are the wishing moon, which is 3 days after the new moon, which says, I am receiving. See that? If you tilt it, I am receiving
Okay.
from the universe.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm really grateful you shared that. So you were reflecting on this in the context of having been with your mother, and I think what you said was you were doing some word game
Right.
practice. And so take us there.
So I just feel like I relinquish all power when I'm there. I just do what's expected. And it's interesting because my mom's expectations are, you know, narcissistic, I guess. Like I
Because a
walk in the front
narcissist would
door
be
and she
all
goes,
about herself.
I only want to ask you to do one thing, which is the start of a million things.
Does she say, hello, I'm glad to see you?
Uh, Sometimes.
I have a wonderful son that I love, and he's on he's on the spectrum among other things. And he, for a long time, really worked hard at remembering to ask the question, how are you?
Right,
And that's as far as it went emotionally because he didn't really want to hear an answer. So,
right,
how are you? Wait a few seconds, and then go right into what he's going to tell me about. But I appreciated the effort.
right,
Okay. So now, with a narcissist, it's almost impossible to maintain power because the
right.
narcissist is all about having total power and using other people to
So
fulfill
here's
their
my
needs.
maladaptive use of power or expression of power. I smoke
Okay.
cigarettes when I'm there a
And what
lot.
does that mean? What does
I
that mean to
smoke
you, sweetie? Hmm.
well because what that's was my first time as a young person. I was 13 years old when I was allowed to smoke at home. My mom came down to my friend's house and we were talking, and my mom said, "Oh, I'm so proud of Denise. She tells me everything." And so I go, I smoke. And so I was smoking ever since then.
What did
Kind
she
of blew
say?
up on her, which I was that kind of kid.
Yeah, no, well, smart move. You gave yourself permission to do something you might not have otherwise
Right.
have been able
eh,
to talk about. Oh my
Right.
God.
So I use the smoking, I think still, I think it's your body remembers that is how I felt I had at least some agency.
Mhm.
I smoke.
Yeah, you got it. The body keeps the score, says Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and the body remembers. The body remembers the pain and the abuse, doesn't forget that. But the body also remembers how to self-medicate.
Right.
And so from age 12, 13, you learn something that by smoking that gave you a sense of what?
Of power, of agency.
Hmm. I think I've told you that I tried smoking briefly, but it didn't do much for me. But there was a smoking room in the college that I went to, and I noticed that a lot of people went to that smoking room. It was in the library. People went to that smoking room, and they seemed to get, some sort of something out of it. So I walked in
Right.
this room. It was glass floor to ceiling, all smoky, and people
Oh,
were
so
smoking.
stinky.
Yeah, smoky, stinky. But a couple things I noticed. Number one, and you do this, the gestures of smoking, there's a certain
And
sense of
it's inhale and exhale also, which is breathing. I mean, it's not
breathing. That's a
fully
good point.
healthy breathing, but it is practicing breathing.
And Denise, you're the one that taught me to work with children and say, okay, let's blow out the candle,
Right.
but let's first smell the
Smell the
rose,
flower.
smell the flower. That's right. And so you're right about breathing. So what I'm also noticing here is that people who smoke tell me that there's a comfort level in doing the gestures. Even just the gestures of smoking makes me
Even
feel like I belong.
opening the pack is like a ritual,
Yep.
and a certain way. And yeah, you have to have a lighter, and it has to work. And like I even have to have a backup lighter. And yeah, it it's a ritual as well as self-medicating. And
So why do you think a trauma survivor would feel the need for rituals and maybe feel better as a result of doing rituals?
interestingly, whenever I'm sick and like ill, physically, like a cold or flu or something, I want to go smoke to feel normal again.
Oh, wow.
It
And do you
brings
do that?
it brings me to normal. No, I mean,
Oh,
I wish it would. I no, I want to in any way. I want to quit. So
yeah, no, I support you. I
yeah,
support you, and I know you really worked hard at that various
yeah. I've
times to do
quit
that.
as long as a year on when I was on Chantix, and I've quit a million times. Trust
Mhm.
me. And
I believe in you, girl. I believe you
yeah,
can still do it. But
right
what
now
you're
I have
saying,
physical uh
mhm,
effects from smoking. You know, I have
yes,
mucus in my throat, and when if I smoke more than 3 or 4 cigarettes in a day, I have a wheeze. I get like a wheeze. So it's not good. You know, I want to develop other forms of agency, practice other forms of agency.
so I hear you and I applaud you. And what the situation you're talking about is familiar to trauma survivors, which is when we go back into the lair, when we go back into the setting, when we go back into the field here with how do you,
The
how can we
family
say it?
dynamics, when you go back
It's,
into the family dynamics,
yep. Walk into that place, and there are all kinds of unspoken, unwritten, but powerful messages saying, "Thou
right?
shalt, thou
Plus, I
shalt."
was gone
Yeah,
for 35 years. So
right.
I did not travel back from the West to the East for Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that. But since I've moved back here in 2011, I have
Mhm.
practiced. Well, either I would go every other holiday to my sister, to my mom, to my sister, to my mom.
Yep.
Now my sister doesn't want, you know, I can't meet her. She isn't talking to me right now.
Right,
So I'm
right.
just going to my mom.
Hmm.
And actually, this summer I saw my mom a lot at the cottage, which at the cottage I have more agency. You know, I'm
Why do
40
you
minutes,
think that? Why is that, sweetie? I agree. It's not your mom's setting. She doesn't
right,
own it.
right. Well, she does, but I mean, they've owned it for a long time, but it's not her in
Space.
George's main place. So I don't know. I am only 40 minutes away, so I can go home at any moment that I choose.
Safety. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just a different thing.
So
I
what
can
you're saying
still
is, go ahead.
I can go in the morning to story time, or I can, you know, buy something to eat on the way back, where when I'm there in Delaware, it's hard to contribute. It's hard to like my George is her king or whatever, and she is always constantly trying to stroke his masculinity or whatever. So he has to start the fire. He has to get the wood, but he was sick this time, so I had to. So it's just interesting
What's interesting
dynamic
about it, sweetie?
that, you know, like when we're at the cottage, I'm also not allowed to cook. Like when we all get together, bigger family, my other sister and her husband and whatnot, the men have to cook. It's so weird. The men have to, even if I went and collected all the firewood and they have to build the fire.
Interesting.
It's
All
an
these
interesting
rules.
patriarchal
Hmm.
practice of my family, you know, beliefs or whatever.
And it's so primitive about fire, building the fire is essential.
Right. And
So
I
that's
love it. And when I go to Mishfest, they call me the fire goddess because I spend the morning hunting, you know, kindling.
really good. Yeah. No, I love building fires and I love sitting beside fires. It's essential. It's
Right.
primitive. It's life-giving and it's
Ancestral.
heat-giving. It's ancestral. You know what? Absolutely. So I want to go into what you're saying here because you're saying that you lose your power. you lose your agency. And that agency is another way of saying, I can be true to myself
Right.
when
I
I'm in.
want. Really, it's saying I want to.
Mhm.
That's
I have a
agency.
right. I
Right.
want to. I have a right to, and I'm gonna.
Right.
But we trauma survivors learn early on that there are people, places, and things where we have no power. Places are often in the home. I mean, I would go back to my parents' house for years and feel I could feel. I mean, what do you feel? I just felt like ghosts were speaking to me, or I felt like there were memories coming out of the walls. It was, it's hard to describe and not sound weirdly, but it's nothing weird about speaking the language of feelings and
Right.
unspoken feelings. Nothing weird about that.
No.
Um, Houses, that's why, for example, when I was in Europe, or anywhere actually traveling, there are sacred spaces. Some ground is considered sacred, and it's often because people gathered there to do rituals.
Right.
Like Stonehenge is sacred. And when I lived there in England for a year, I would drive by that place at night with the moon shining on it, and it had such power. It was clearly a sacred space. And
Right.
some people say sacred spaces are vortices, or it's a vortex for energies coming. That might all be true. But what it has to do with trauma survivors is places have histories, and histories have rules, and
Right.
rules have roles, and roles tell us you ain't got no power. You've got to
Right.
survive by doing this. And that, well, what all that does is X's out agency. So you go
Right.
back to your mom, and one of the things you said was the first thing you need to do is to feel like smoking. And what does smoking do for you when you smoke at your mom's?
Because they let me smoke in the house, which no, you can't smoke in the house
Nobody
anywhere,
does, right?
anywhere except I can smoke at my mom's house. So I don't know.
Okay.
It just feels powerful, and I do it.
So you're doing something that's for you. I mean, we know it's got side effects, but
Right.
but you're doing something that's that you do in her context. And meanwhile, what do you feel if you were to put a couple of words on what you feel like when you see your mother at her house? Well, how would you describe that? What is the feeling? What's the mood?
I just kind of take a breath and re relinquish, I guess.
Yep. It is about relinquishing, because the thing about being trauma survivors is we're not supposed to have power. That's the bottom line message. You don't have any power. And be afraid, be very afraid. So if I feel like my power is taken away and I'm very afraid, then all I can do is survive. And that requires this kind of tiny bandwidth in my brain to just obey. Obedience is based in fear. And
Right.
trauma survivors walk around fear based much of the time because we're waiting for the shoe to drop, or we're waiting for the punch to come, or we're waiting for the abusive language, because that's what we learn to expect. But the problem here is, I want to say this from my own experience. I used to get really angry when I was told, don't give away your power. I think you and I have talked about this before. And trauma survivors listening, I want to ask you, has anybody ever said to you, you're giving away your power? Again, don't give your power to that man. Don't give your power to that woman. And I would be so angry. And I got in touch with why I was so angry. It's because I never felt that I had the power
Right.
myself. It was taken
It was
from before.
taken.
It was taken, honey. It was like
And
taken, and that was it. The decision was made without me.
right.
So how
Stinks.
it does stink, girl. So has anybody said to you, don't give your power away?
Um, Not that I really specifically recall. I just knew I really didn't have any. I mean, I, my wounded 22-year-old self didn't have, I didn't feel power. I did not feel it.
Right. And so what life becomes for a trauma survivor, for me as a trauma survivor, is a shifting around to see where can I fit into somebody else's world.
Right,
I'd meet a new person. Well, how can I fit into this person's world? I go to a new school, university. How do I fit in here? It was
yep,
all about survival. It was not about I have the power to do what I want here. I look
right,
back at the schooling and I think, wow, the only time I really did that was in law school because I knew law school was going to be a challenge because it was all men, mainly all men at the time. But I decided I was going there for my own reasons. And most people go to law school to develop a profession that will pay them well, or maybe
right,
they go because the profession's a sturdy one and they want to make a difference. There are lots of reasons, but mostly they go for practical reasons to build this profession. I had no idea what lawyers did. All I knew was Perry Mason.
right,
But so I went for a different reason. I went because I was tired of being assumed to be inferior because I was a woman in the 1960s. And I thought if I can do something unusual, like become an attorney and have that power, then I will have some agency. I will have some agency. So this whole quest that children have to have agency and trauma survivors have for much of our lives to have agency, it's really for me getting myself back
right.
because what I sacrificed was myself. So did you feel like you sacrificed what did you sacrifice when you became your, like what do you sacrifice when you go to your mother's and take care of her?
Desire,
Mm-hmm.
um, interest, what my interests are,
What you want. Yep.
what what I
What you
want to
need.
do, how I want to spend my time. I do not get that, there.
And so why do you go?
Because that was my whole reason, in 2011, really, yeah, in 2011, I moved in November actually. So, uh,
Wow.
but in 2011, I wanted to change my life. I was noticing all the time that people saying, my sister, my brother, I'm going to go there, and I was like, I should go, work with my family maybe. So I
Mm-hmm.
moved back this way because I wanted to integrate with my family.
Did you want to have a sense of belonging?
Yeah, probably. I did have a good sense of belonging in Arizona. I had an Arizona family, community, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, warm, deep connections, traditions, stuff like that. But I just wanted to be with my family.
I hear you. And there it is. There's the heartbreak because we
Right,
just want to be. I mean, what a simple, heartfelt desire to just want to be home.
right. Which where
Just
they live was never my home. I never lived there. They moved away when I was a sophomore in college, south 2 hours.
mm,
So it never was my home, but it is my family.
right, 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 right. The word home is often the same as family. Wherever family is home.
Right.
And that's why it's, no accident that Ram
But
Dass
I
said,
just have home right here.
yes, that's
I
right.
am, yeah.
That's a big deal. That's why this program is entitled Trauma Survivors Walking Each Other Home, because Ram Dass said, whatever his original name was, he said, we're all just walking each other home. And it's a hard journey. And it helps if we can be with other people that we know care about us and walk beside us. I,
And
I
help
was at
us
a,
reflect on it.
and help us feel like we belong. That is a harsh thing. A trauma survivor often doesn't feel she belongs anywhere because she doesn't belong in the family because the family couldn't see her, couldn't hear her, and abused her. But she doesn't belong anybody anyplace else either. It's like no woman's land. Does that make sense? Like we just
Yeah.
don't know where the hell we belong. So you're out there in Arizona, you're doing well, you're
Yeah.
teaching, you got a whole group of good friends,
I had a
and you
quality home care business that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I did story times around town.
Wonderful.
It was perfect.
Wonderful.
I loved it. I lived in a little teeny tiny guest house that I didn't even have a bedroom. That was the preschool room. And I
Mhm.
slept on the couch and I was in sheer heaven.
Right.
Did
Because
that
we
for
don't
a
need
few
much.
years. Yeah.
We don't need much. You had the essentials. What were the essentials that you had there in that tiny space?
I had a nice kitchen, refrigerator full of fresh vegetables and fruits, which I served to the children all the time. And, my philosophy was you have to eat all your colors.
It- That's a
And
Denise saying. If you don't know, Denise is into health by saying, eat all your colors, the red pepper and the green pepper and the yellow, yellow what? Squash and the orange.
squash,
And
or there's yellow peppers.
yeah.
Corn's also yellow.
Hmm. Yeah. So what you're saying here is, because I want to go back to agency. And what I'm trying to say is that traumatized children don't have agency.
Right,
That's real. I mean, sometimes we develop false agency. There are two routes to go for a traumatized child. One is to be the victim, because we are victims. We don't have the power to stop what's going on. But the other is to be the person who emulates or becomes like the abuser.
right. Which I did have the bike riding that was agency.
Right,
That
you did.
is one way that I felt agency in my childhood was
Yep.
getting on my bike and riding across town.
And what did that do for you?
It got me away from the house.
Got you out, got you free, got you
Right,
breathing
right. Breathing.
and active and all the things that make us feel better
Right,
in the sunlight, in
right,
nature, and freedom to explore all that. You didn't have any of that in the house.
right, right.
And did anybody ask you where you were going or care where you were going?
No, we would just go and we were unsupervised a lot.
And what do you think about that in terms, not in terms of what we should do, but in terms of trauma surviving kids, that we were neglected, and neglect is hurts. And yet we used it, right?
Right.
How did you
We
use that?
develop survival skills, I mean, and pursue interests and love other people.
It's like Dr. Judith Herman said in Trauma and Recovery. She said, trauma survivors, children have, and adults too, we have remarkable creative capacities. So, honey, just like you, I would organize what was called bike hikes. Every Saturday, we would go on this is before the bikes that had gears. I mean, we're
Right,
out there going up these hills and we're out there, we're taking we bag our lunch and take it with us. We are exploring. We are explorers. And it was so freeing to be in charge. And the other thing is, nobody cared. Sadly, sad to say, my father is a
right,
narcissist. Your mother is a narcissist. They didn't care as long as they didn't have to bother with us, and as long as somebody wouldn't look at them like, "Oh, something's wrong with you for not knowing where your kids are." No, we were
right,
expected to be back at a certain time, so
right.
that
And we were.
made them look good. I'm sorry,
And we were. We were
and we
back
were,
when we were
honey,
supposed to be back.
because if we
Compliant.
didn't come back, what would happen?
They'd come looking for you, beat your ass or
That's right. That's right. So talk more about agency. So you're now working on this. Tell me about your plan.
right. So my plan is the things that I starred were take action, uh work, and adjust my inclinations, which that's
And
going to
what
be
is,
the smoking because I get inclined to smoke then once get in the habit of it, and then I'm in just that's my inclination. Oh, I'm going to go smoke. Oh, I'm going to go smoke. Oh, I'm going to go smoke. So I'm going to adjust inclinations
okay?
and work more. I'm going to add more work to week, my weekly schedule.
But that's not punishment for you. That's not
No,
like,
it's
no,
beautiful.
it's fun.
Right, it's fun. And, because I am now doing, it's not like I'm giving up my agency to a company for 40 hours a week. No, I go 1 hour over here, 1 hour over here, 1 hour over here.
And there are places that love you and want you. There are
Right,
places where you love the work that you do, and there are places where when you get there, you're in charge. You're in
right.
charge.
I'm in charge and the kids are in heaven and uh it's good. So I'm
It's a
going to
great
add more.
feeling.
I'm going to add a
Good for you.
Tuesday stop, I think. I also did I do only one Saturday a month at the Ability Center, which is a special education services in our community,
Hmm.
disability services.
Hmm.
And so I haven't filled my Saturday, but because I have that one commitment and you can't, I mean, to me,
That's
you have to do it every week to build a following. But
mhm.
at Barnes and Noble, they haven't done a story time in 2 years. And one of my clients told me they haven't done a story time in 2 years. Go over there and sell a story time, which I didn't really think I wanted any more public story times because they don't pay me. But if I ask her to pay me and
Hmm.
put out a tip jar, so I, got up my uh, gumption and went in there and talked to her.
Uh-huh.
I told her I wanted her to pay me and put out a tip jar. And so she hasn't gotten back yet because Barnes and Noble's kind of big, so it takes a
Yep.
long
Yep.
time to go through. Probably next year I'll be starting there.
But that's only a month away.
Right. It's
Girl,
only
that's exciting. So let me be clear. You're saying to her, I want you to pay me, plus I'll get tips.
right. Plus
Oh,
I'll
well,
put out
good
my
for
tip jar.
you. Yeah, that's just about right.
Right.
Because you're doing a service for Barnes and Noble. That's getting kids in there. It's getting parents, and they're going to probably buy something.
Right. And
And
then
then
people make friends.
that's right.
I had Borders books when I was in Phoenix.
I
And I would
remember.
have to put out like 100 chairs and make a huge corral. Maybe it was only 50, but it was a lot of chairs.
Yeah.
And
Good for you.
so in that setting, I can develop a large following.
I'm sure
There's
you do. You're
there's
good at what
space
you
for
do.
it and everything. So we'll see. That's out there. And there's another place that I also inquired with is in Sylvania, which is 2 miles to my left. Uh, I'm in Sylvania even, but where I'm on the edge, the main Sylvania is like 2 miles away, the
Okay.
downtown, and that someone there is opening a indoor play space, children's indoor play space, and
Fun.
coffee shop for the moms. That's how they're defining it. So I inquired with them also but they're not even opening till next year.
Okay. But that's a perfect place to get in on the ground. Whatever
Right,
that cliche is, get in on the ground floor. That's
right.
great. That's great. And you're working with the Parks Department in the summertime, right?
There is a woman that has
Recreation.
a farm. We had an interesting interaction recently. She canceled me the last 2 weeks. I was tutoring from 3 to 5, and she
Mm-hmm.
canceled me the last 2 weeks, but at the last minute.
Oh, not good.
Right, which would kind of, bugged me. But so then she recently sent me an email saying she wants to change it to Saturdays, which she didn't ask me, or, I don't have Saturdays available for that.
Right. So,
So
have you been in touch? Have you gotten back to her?
yeah, and it's a little awkward, but I think it'll work out fine because I'm going to do monarchs there in the spring.
Right.
So
That's right.
that was the plan. So we'll see what happens with that. But
But meanwhile, this clock is ticking down on your Janice recently retired, but she's being smart and waiting until she's a certain age so she can get the Social Security at a higher level. So what's the clock ticking down to there? How much time
let's
you
see,
got left?
that's May. That's May. So, and
6 months, girl.
yeah, I'm not that far away. So I'm making it. I have the
Yes, you are.
means. I
You
have
got
my
the agency, girl. You
right,
got the agency.
which that's one of the word synonyms for agency is means. It's one of the
Interesting.
things that I say I have because I was really not using my whole income for quite a few years with the Head Start. So that's
Right.
why
You
I have
saved it up.
means. Yeah, I saved a lot up.
And you're still doing that. You live very economically, right?
I do. I'm a frugal gal.
You are. And you've got that money saved up. And I want you to know that I was saving money too. Of course, University of Maine, they put money aside, but what a trauma therapist had to say to me was when I was trying to figure out, can I afford to do this? He used to love to ask rhetorical questions that were but they weren't rhetorical to a trauma survivor. They were like common sense, and I didn't get raised on common sense. So
Right,
he said to me a very simple question, and I could see the twinkle in his eye, like a Santa Claus twinkle. He said, so Holly Elissa, who made that money? Who earned that money?
right,
And the whole time I'm on the deficit syndrome stuff, like I'll never have enough money.
right. I
I'm
don't
gonna,
have enough. I'll never
I don't
get to
have enough.
plenty. Right,
I'll never get to plenty. I'll never be safe financially. And I still deal with that. It's not just because, well, comes from a different type of trauma. Both of my parents came out of the trauma of the Depression,
right,
and both families were very poor and were large families, 8 kids. And, be grateful for what you've got.
right,
Don't complain. And if you have to go to bed hungry, that's what we have to do. Well, grin and bear it. That was the family motto. Grin and bear it. So there was no so the fear of not being enough and not having enough, that goes with the territory of being a trauma survivor. And yet tomorrow I leave to fly halfway around the world.
right on.
Tomorrow, you got it, girlfriend. Tomorrow I fly to uh, Doha, and from Doha in Qatar, I then fly to Bangalore. And what the hell am I doing that? I'm living my life. I am doing what I promised myself I would do when I was 22. The epitaph on my gravestone was going to say, Holly, she lived her life. And Holly, she felt at home anywhere on earth. And so I was feeling depressed a couple of days ago. Do I really want to travel? Don't know anybody halfway. What am I doing? And then I said, just wait it out. Anticipatory anxiety is something
Right,
that goes with the territory of being a trauma survivor. And by anticipatory anxiety, I mean that rarely does anything just come as a yippee skippy. It's often, whoop, I got to get scared first. Like when you were saying you went to that work that you went to briefly, girl, you're going to work on Monday morning. You have your clothes set up. You get a little some anxiety. You're like going to show up. You got everything planned. It's that anticipatory anxiety that goes with the territory of being a survivor because we never had. I don't want to sound like a victim, but it was true. I never had the security of knowing that things were going to be okay unless
right,
I made them okay.
right,
I couldn't count on other people. That's what one of my trauma therapists has said to me. One of the harshest things about being a trauma survivor is we couldn't count on the people that were supposed to be there for us. And that is a life or death sentence I can carry the rest of my life, or I can say, just like what you're talking about when you're talking about your plan, action. I can take action. I can reach out and say, I'm scared. I can call someone and say, I need to talk with you. Okay, I need to talk with you about this. Or I can say, I feel lonely right now. I feel lonely, or I'm scared. What if I get sick halfway around the world? Guess what?
you
I
did
have
get
gotten
sick.
sick.
Yeah,
I got sick in Singapore, but I also had a concussion in Pune, India. I'm going to be speak to to like 100 room of 100 leaders. I'm not going to not speak. And I did, but the next day I looked like a raccoon because I had,
Black
and,
eyes.
and yet, so here's the thing. So even those worst fears, when they come true, there's nothing worse than feeling in pain and feeling alone. That's the hard thing, is like, I've got to suffer. My mother used to say that to us as her daughters. You got to suffer to be beautiful. And I took that as a metaphor. You got to suffer to to become a good person.
Right.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. And that punitive stuff is so much with me. I was visiting a good friend. Her sisters were down from Canada and she wanted me to come over, and I was glad to. An early childhood director person. And her husband's been very ill for a long time. And so I went to see him too. And he's getting near the end of his life. And so I went to be in the room with him. And I was asking him to the extent that he wanted to talk about it, because sometimes it helps people to talk and sometimes it doesn't. But I figured I would just wait and see. The minute we started talking about it, tears came to his eyes because he knows he's going to die soon. And I spontaneously said, "Hey, honey, if anybody's earned his way to heaven, you have." Now, what the hell did that come out of? It came out of early childhood, early years stuff about you got to earn your way to heaven. You got to work hard. You don't just get anywhere unless you
Right.
work hard. Please. Most most religion stuff now is saying you don't have to earn it. You're just born that way. There's no
Right.
more original sin. But I'm from that whole original sin time, like you messed up.
Right. You
Go,
already messed up. When you were just born, you already messed up.
right? I couldn't understand that. I used to argue that. People would just say, nope, that's the way God made it, and that's the way it is. Oh, please. So, girl, agency. You want to take your power back, is what you're saying.
Right.
But did you ever give it away? Or
No,
was it
I
just
haven't
taken?
given it completely away. I relinquish it when I'm there at their place. But you know, also I would relinquish it for my job. Although I
Oh,
did
so,
have a lot of agency too, but my time, I
okay.
ugh, it
Oh,
was so much time. So yeah, I want to just, reestablish new action and new means.
and that is a crucial trait of trauma survivors. We are reactors rather than actors. We react to situations rather than step in and say, okay, I have choices here. But Denise, ever since you and I have been doing this program together, you've been stepping up and finding ways to make choices. Like you decided you were going to retire. You decided that, but you didn't do it just like, okay, that's it. You got advice.
Right,
You decided the choices you were going to make about your retirement funding. You decided about that. And as a result, you're getting yourself a benefit by waiting before you take Social Security. All this stuff is so good, but it goes back to, I know for me as a survivor, that I was taught to live life in response to somebody else, not by choice. And the
right,
great freedom as a trauma survivor is for me to say, I have choice. I made a choice a year ago to pay when the pain was like cheap to go to India. And no matter what's going on in my life, I'm going to India. Okay. That's a choice. And it's a choice to feed my soul. Because when I travel in other countries and I don't know anybody and I'm learning all the time and I'm making friends and I'm seeing everything and I'm taking it in, I feel like a little kid in a candy store, a little kid in a beautiful heaven. And that's a choice. That's agency. It's so what I'm hearing here and thinking here is, wow, the bottom line of a trauma survivor is we were taught early We don't have any power. Power was taken. And so if
Right.
somebody says to us, "We'll take your power back," I want to say to you, how am I going, what? I didn't have it to give away. How am I going to take it back? We're saying something different now, Denise. You're saying, wait a
We have
minute.
to activate it
And how do we do that? How do we activate the agency?
by
What you
taking
doing, girl?
action, by figuring out what we want and need.
And because trauma survivors were raised to be needless and wantless,
Right.
how the hell do we do that? Well, a little bit at a time, right?
Little word games. That's how I've done it.
So if
Or
you were to teach
that's one
me,
of my copings. Yeah.
okay, so teach me a word game. So
Which is, to get a thesaurus and go for the, words, or listen for a word in the world that is like, who really was also inspiring in this new endeavor of me pursuing new agency is Jane Fonda. She was on the program the other day. She's like 86 years old. She was on the, I don't watch TV at home, but with my mom, I watch TV. And the program was, is it Good Morning America on Sunday or Sunday morning or
honey, I don't know. I don't know,
some
but whatever.
television show that's, ABC or CBS or something, standard.
Okay.
And so Jane Fonda was on there and she said there's 7 things to being, to instead of accepting that being old or aging or being elderly is increasing your disabilities, you think of it in a different way. You
Good.
know, you frame it differently. You frame it as this is a new, this is a new era of agency. And I can't, repeat the 7 things, but it was very inspiring to
Mhm.
that, I create my reality.
She calls it Act Three.
Yeah,
It's like the first act's important, the second act is important, and the third act is really important.
right. And
It's
this is my
Act
third
Three.
act.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. That's a great perspective. If we go with the expectations that are set for us, we lose half of our lives,
Right,
if not all of our lives. And agency is about saying a radical thing. I have a right to live my life. I have a right to live my life the way I want to. And if we help little children learn that they have a right to do that and to say that,
right. Practice
that's
making choices. That's it. If they
that's it,
get
honey.
practice making choices, they actually develop their own agency.
That's right. Were you given practice making choices?
No,
So how did you make
compliance,
choices? Compliance,
compliance.
obedience.
But
Mhm.
if I got on my bicycle, then I had to make a lot of choices.
That's right. So you did it yourself.
Right,
I hear you. It's interesting that education is either about compliance, obedience, and towing the line, or it's about learning,
right,
learning to make decisions. And I love that about early childhood education. It's the best kept secret that when early childhood education is done well, like the Fred Rogers doing well, those children get skills for life. Or as a
right.
friend of mine, I'm so sorry to say, I just want to dedicate this moment to her, my dear friend, Dr. Kay Albrecht, who wrote a book called Set for Life, and who also was the key mover and shaker who set up the relief in the Superdome in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. Kay did
Uh-huh.
that. Kay died November 1st. And he's only like younger than I am, 70 something maybe. Um, anyway, she used to believe that children were set for life if they got the basic skills about
Right,
decision making and making healthy decisions. So what's a healthy decision? I didn't learn any of that stuff. Everything was thou shalt obey or be punished. So it was
Right. And
black
children
and
are
white.
seen and not heard.
That's
That was,
right.
kind of a thing that they threw around a lot back then.
And if children were heard, they were, in my case, they were punished, get punished for being heard and shunned for having a voice of your own.
Right.
Ah, the irony. My mother always used to say, "Don't you have a mind of your own?" Well, what she was punishing me for was
Was for
having a
having
mind.
a mind of exactly. Like there's a meme that I've seen on Facebook is, you're trying to develop a girl child with independence and, power but just not right now.
That's right. That's right. And you might have to
And
wait
it's
another
hard to
life.
live with.
It is. Sweetie, I'm looking at our time. We probably got like 5 minutes max left, maybe 3 to 4. So let's look at this, how we want to, for ourselves and perhaps invite the listeners too. This whole thing about agency, about having power when we're taught power is bad. I mean, what message did you get about power when you were a kid? What did you assume about power?
Yeah, no, it was for men.
It was for men, and it was for men only, or a woman if she was the only one left in the house. But
Right,
the woman was going to replicate whatever the man did, which was to have power over, and
right.
power over meant punishment, abuse, shaming, and annihilation. Now, that's not a pretty picture of power.
No,
So it's no wonder that women are power averse because it was used against us,
right,
right? And that reminds me of the recent statement, I'll protect women whether they want it or not.
right. I think that's exactly sums it up.
Yes, it does. That's it, girlfriend. So agency, isn't that the heart of what a trauma survivor needs and wants? Yeah.
Yes.
Sweetie, I'll call you back at 4. It's my son. Timing is off. It's okay. Yeah. So you're taking your power back, girl. I'm taking my power back. And
Yeah.
sometimes, do you ever feel guilty
We've
about
got
it?
the
Got
power.
the power, honey. But do you ever feel bad about it?
No.
Good. Good. I'm getting better and better at that. I used to have shame attacks when I would do something, but recently, I don't know if I've seen you since this happened, but I got angry at a person. I raised my voice and I chose to do it. It was a choice.
Right.
Let me turn this off. It was a choice um, because this person was, she was in a service position, and I generally give them a lot of leeway because they don't have much power. But she said to me, she's really angry at me. And I won't go into details about it, but I might have talked about it last week, but she basically said, "You're lying." I said, wait a minute. I had been given a late checkout. And when you get a late checkout, when I could get it, I rely upon it. So she was like saying all this stuff about, "Didn't you get my call?" And I said, "No." Anyway, bottom line was she was being really, I thought, quite inappropriate. And so I raised my voice when she wasn't listening to my everyday words. And I said, "No, no." And that was a choice
Right.
because women and anger, how many women are comfortable with anger? I was learned to fear anger, to fear power, because power and anger go together. There's rage. So now I know if Fred Rogers nailed it, what do I do with the mad that I have? I use it. I use it constructively. I channel it. I use it when I need to, and it's okay to be angry. Can you imagine
Yep.
that?
That's awesome.
It's awesome, girl. That's one of the hardest things for me to learn. I would run, run from anger because it meant violence was coming.
Right.
But I can be angry without being violent. And I can be angry and use it to the greater good. Righteous anger. That's it.
Yep.
So, sweetheart, what would you like to say to folks as you're wrapping for the day?
Thank you for this opportunity for me to reflect on, my new pursuit of agency. I appreciate, exploring it, and I know that you hear me and you ask really nice questions, and that's really helpful.
Thank you, sweetheart. And you know what? As we do this together, we do this for all others. As you explore things, I get this shit-eating grin on my face because I know you're going to be doing something that we all could benefit from, and we do. So let's get together if we can. Now, I'm going to be in India next week, but if I can pull it off, even if I'm 12 hours ahead, it'll be early morning or something.
I thought you were in India this week.
I leave tomorrow.
I saw the first picture, that you posted,
Oh, those are
but it
from
was a
last year's
memory,
trip.
right?
Yes,
Yeah, it
those
was
memories
last
came
year's.
up. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I leave tomorrow and I come back on the 19th.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm excited, but I also want to do this program from there. So let's see what we can do.
All
So
right.
you might have to, like, wake me up, but you could just ask me questions. I'll wake up.
Yep.
Okay, girl,
Now
love
you'll
you.
be
And
stimulated in your new environment.
God Almighty, it's
It'll be
such,
great.
it is like being a kid again. Everything's new and
Yeah.
everything's wondrous and everything is an invitation. And I love that.